everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to do a quick update on the F1 Monaco predictions using Astrology. So I think I was fairly accurate in most of my predictions, particularly Charles having that crash out of the century, being very angry at his team because Jupiter in the 9th house is squaring his natal moon in the 6th. And of course, the 6th house actually has domain over things like mechanical parts. So when that comes to the brakes are not working, I'm a bit annoyed about that. Yeah, I can understand that. He also has Saturn transiting the 6th house because he's having a Saturn return right now. Saturn also deals with the foundations of things, the boundaries. So sometimes we see that as things like concrete, but also it has domain over boundaries and stopping, which also includes brakes. This is how sort of detailed you have to be when you're looking at something as complex as a Formula One race. Now, the second thing I also wanted to note, which I briefly did in the first video, which is that all of the drivers that are doing, I won't say poorly, but are struggling this year have a Saturn return in Aries. Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Max Verstappen. Max has not got one single win this year, and he was doing so well last year. George has only got one win, and he's having such a stroke of bad luck. And I suspect that's because his Saturn return is taking place, but also Saturn in Aries is opposite his Libra natal moon. Now, he didn't have this at the start of the season with Australia because Saturn would have only just moved into Aries at very early degrees. Now it's getting closer to his moon. It's really hitting it. Now, what's that going to do? Saturn is going to constrict your moon, and that is causing, emotional whiplash, volatility. I mean, his interview yesterday was basically, he said, I'm flat. I just don't understand. I can't comprehend. I feel numb. I feel kind of like, I don't really understand this. Hopeless is probably the feeling. Now, this is really interesting when we look at his destiny matrix, because I said 17 as the star. It's hope and faith after a difficult time. But I also mentioned that we don't know whether something is in positive or negative with destiny matrix. There is no way of knowing until it plays out. So, for example, Fernando Alonso in 7 energy is opposite for him. It's like the car is just not working for him. Whereas 17 is a hopelessness if it's in the negative. And sometimes energies can be reversed due to astrological placements and other things. Now, the problem I said about George, and again, George is the driver I support, so I don't want him to do poorly. But one thing I mentioned was that if he lets the Saturn return get to him, it becomes self-sabotage. It becomes a depression. And it's sort of playing out that way, which is a shame. Charles Leclerc also having a Saturn return in his 6th house. Nasty house to have a Saturn return in. When you have Saturn returns in cadent houses, it can be very difficult time on your mental health, your physical health, just feeling a bit I know because I had my Saturn return in a cadent house in the 3rd. So that can be quite difficult. Max Verstappen also having a Saturn return in his 5th house, which I mentioned was basically him feeling like he's not having fun. And I also talked about when Jupiter enters his 9th house in July, he's going to feel like retirement is the most enticing thing. So there's definitely a feeling of that. I want to insert a video here. I'll put the credit of Lewis Hamilton, because I talked about Lewis having a rise this year, and everyone was like, yeah. I'm like, trust me. He's entering that energy he was in when he won his first championship. And before these fools say he's over with, check the rest of the years. 10, 15 again. He's not going anywhere.
People said that Lewis Hamilton needs to retire. I thought he was washed. A car merchant. Yeah, he's the one on the podium at 41 years old in Monaco. Oh, he's P2 in the standings, is he? Oh, he's beating George Russell. He's beating Charles Leclerc. He's beating the McLarens. He's beating Max Verstappen. And
he's second in the championship right now. And his chart looked a lot more favourable. One observation I also want to show you is, why can someone like Charles have a Scorpio rising and Lewis have a Scorpio rising? And obviously there's very similar transits, but they're not interacting in the same way. Well, the obvious one is, of course, different natal placements. So when these transits interact, there's different natal placements. The second observation is, if you look at Max Verstappen's chart and Lewis Hamilton, what's the common observation here? It's Jupiter, the planet of abundance, in the 3rd house. right? Now, this is really incredible because we know that Jupiter is all about growth. It's about bringing luck. So why has Lewis been able to amass the most championships, and how has Max been able to, 4 times world champion? But someone like Charles Leclerc, who is admittedly very talented, hasn't been able to achieve that yet. He doesn't have that natal luck in the third house of transport. I always say I looked for the third house for being blessed with an understanding of engineering, an understanding of technically Formula One. I have to be very careful about this because I don't want anyone to think I don't think Charles is a good driver. I think he is. But at one point we have to assess that he's only had 8 wins in the time he's been in Formula One. It's not a great track run. I mean, Oscar Piastri has more, right? So I think we have to assess that. So I think it's interesting that looking at a common observation of the analysis of people saying, well, the 2 best drivers in Formula One, statistically, right now is probably Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Yes. Jupiter in the third house. I would be interested to see Lando Norris's chart. I don't have his rising sign, but I'd be interested to see where, his elements lie. So if we look ahead to Barcelona for Charles, we can see that Mercury is going to be squaring his natal Saturn. Now, Mercury rules transport and vehicle engineering, particularly, whereas something like Mars is more focused on the actual small parts. This is why you have to put it all together. And Saturn is about constriction and sort of teaching you a lesson. So that makes me think, if I'm looking at the chart overall, there's still a struggle next week. There's still a struggle for him. We also know that the Jupiter-Venus conjunction is past. On the day of the race of Barcelona, we actually have a new moon in Gemini, which is in the 8th house. Now that's got to be a new start where you say enough's enough here. Gemini has its associations with car racing because it's ruled by Mercury. So you have to say enough's enough. And this shows up differently based on the chart. Like I said, Charles has a bit more of a sort of struggle. Lewis has more of a, I'm ready to push, I'm going to push and push and push. I think Lewis's chart is very reminiscent of his words recently, which is that we're just going to keep going, keep pushing, always more to be improved on. So I don't necessarily think, or maybe I should say I hypothesize, that Charles might struggle again next week. Now, one thing I wanted to explore is, can we see something like a car not starting in a birth chart? Well, yes, we can. If we go to Max's chart, we can see Mars at 14 degrees. Now, Mars is inherently a malefic planet. And again, it also has domain over things like small parts in engineering. So does the 6th house, actually. So it's quite interesting that's in the 6th house. Now, it's actually squaring his natal Jupiter in the 3rd house. We need to look at these houses that have domain over things like vehicle manufacturing, things not working, right? Particularly in Aquarius. So when you've got something like Mars in the 6th squaring Jupiter in the 3rd, we can see there's a lot of different ways of looking at this. So one thing I've been talking about recently and hopping on a lot is that I don't like Mars in Taurus because it's incredibly slow. It's like driving a Porsche behind a John Deere tractor. You can't get the damn thing moving, quite literally, right? So in Taurus, that energy is stubborn and it's prone to things like overheating or just basically not moving at all. So it basically things like the car just refuses to move, right? So in that 6th house, it creates this tension because you cannot move, you cannot get going. And it's also the idea that the 6th house is reliability. So if you can't move something that you're meant to rely on, the race is not happening for you, right? It's not happening for Max. If you have that natal Jupiter in Aquarius, Jupiter is going to represent the 3rd house themes of journeys. So when you have that as a square, the race is not going to go ahead for you. That square is a point of friction, point of crisis or action. It becomes impatient. So when you have that clash with something like a mechanical problem, then it's just not working. So we can see in Max's chart that Mars, this traditional malefic planet, squaring Jupiter, another traditional benefic planet actually. But again, it's, if you see it as Jupiter is not hurting the situation. Max didn't start the race. What could have happened is he started the race, the car goes out, he crashes. It becomes more catastrophic. So Jupiter and Mars, like benefic comes with malefic, it's basically like diluted, nothing happens, like fire meets water, nothing happens, nothing burns, it just is. So you can see that in the chart. And you can also see a few other things, which is that Max has a lot of energy in his 8th house right now. Again, not the easiest house to have energy in. When Jupiter moves into his 9th house, he's going to have more understanding of, do I want to retire? Do I want to do something more fun? If we look at the event chart for Monaco, I want to show you how you can see problems with foundation. So Mercury in Cancer. Mercury is, again, I'm talking about transport, but it has domain over things like the runways of like, being at an airport, like the tarmac. Cancer, about foundations and structure. When it is squaring Saturn in Aries, while Aries has the energy of impulsiveness, but Saturn is actually concrete. So boundary, again, so you can see that square as a issue. 8th house is often about things that are broken, and the 11th house is trying to put those things together, trying to salvage it. So again, it's not catastrophic, but people get caught out by it. Again, especially in the 11th house, where it's like it's going to affect other people rather dramatically. I mean, it did affect about 3 people. So that's a very specific type of aspect that can cause things like broken tarmac, things falling apart, generally just foundational structures that don't work, right? You could probably see this in your own chart if you were in a car and you went over a massive pothole and you pushed your tyre. So it's not just in like an F1 race, you can see this in your own chart too. Another thing I wanted to talk about is Kimi Antonelli doing so well. Now, Kimi Antonelli, I put in my predictions that he was entering the world energy, which is a very successful ending. So I said that he would have success. I did, and I will hold myself accountable for everything I say here. I did say I didn't think he'd win the championship. And the reason why is because I'm using logic. I was like, well, he's only in his 2nd year. We know there's more experienced drivers. We also know he didn't win last year. So it would be kind of strange to say he was going to win the championship this year. Although I did say Mercedes was obviously going to dominate. Now, I'm very honest about my predictions. I'm never going to say like, oh, well, I meant it this way. No, if I said something, I probably meant it. I'm allowed to change my mind, though. That's what we should be doing. I don't think we should have to stand on business for something you don't agree is correct anymore. Now, the reason why I want to bring this up is because I believe that George was in a equally as good energy. But I also mentioned he was having a Saturn return, which Kimi isn't. So I did point out there are factors that can cause constriction. Now, if you put the world as a tarot card against the star, 21 versus 17 in Destiny Matrix, which card comes out on top? Well, normally it's the world, so Kimi. And that's because the world signifies that everything is finished. It's done. It's a successful completion. Victory's won. I'm done. I'm reaping the rewards. After August, his birthday, he goes into number 8 energy, more of the justice, strength. So it becomes a different type of energy, which is why I'm like, I don't want to say straight away this is how it's going to work. Whereas for someone like Lewis Hamilton, he's in his 15 energy the whole year. It's not changing. And we can see how things can change quickly. Look at Max Verstappen last year, entering the 7 energy, and then pretty much missing the championship by, 1-2 points. So it can change very quickly. George is in his 17 energy all year. Kimi's not going to be in that world energy for the whole time. That doesn't mean he still won't be amazing. I mean, George is going to need to do really well consecutively for the next 10 races to start to really feel like he's battling. And that's going to be hard. So the world is a pinnacle of accomplishment. It's a graduation almost. I'm doing so well. It does have Saturnian themes, which is why I did worry about it. But it's also about finishing a cycle. If you think about Kimi last year, he was in the energy that Lando Norris is now in, which is like trying to find his footing in a way, having a bit of a transformation, having a lot of problems with his car actually, which we can see that he did. He DNF'd a lot. And Lando's also having a lot of problems with his car. That 13 energy is not very forgiving. So the world is more of a happy ending. The star is less about accomplishment and more about healing and hope. But if you think about the star, it's about being known. And actually, I think George is probably in the limelight more than he was, because we thought he was going to win the championship. I mean, he won in Australia. Everyone was like, well, George, I hope you're happy. You're getting that championship. And actually, it's not like that. It's more about feeling that this is your time and you've got that hope after a really difficult time. It also shows potential. You know, there is a big potential for you to be a world champion. God, that truck was loud. So it shows that you're on the right path. But if you have something like a Saturn return, it's going to pull you back. Again, we know that Max and Charles also have that Saturn return in Aries, which is debilitated. It's not a good Saturn placement to have. I believe that if you have the right mindset, that Saturn return in Aries and the world or the 17 energy can create champions. So I still want to hope that it's going to be fine. But if we're looking at it and we're reassessing after knowing a bit more information and also using our logic, yeah, Kimmy's doing well. He's doing better if we look at the world versus the star. Don't have Kimmy's rising sign, but whatever is good. He's also got Virgo sun and Virgo moon. So he's got a lot of Mercury energy. When you have a lot of Mercury energy as a driver, it's generally pretty good. Again, I don't know George's rising sign. I suspect it's Cancer. If so, that Saturn returns in the 10th house. It's giving humiliation ritual. It's giving everyone seeing me fail on a very public scale. All right? Whereas Charles in a 6th house, it's not that he's not feeling humiliated. It's more of a people will still give him a pass for it. Whereas George is like, he ain't getting a pass for any of that. There's something in George's chart that is attracting negative speculation. People don't like him. And there's always something in the chart that suggests that. For example, James Charles, as a Cancer rising, has a few things in his chart which show that people don't like him, but also there's other things like Venus in his first, which say he'll bounce back from the problems. So you really need to see a natal chart. And this is why I say your predictions can only be mixed with a little bit of astrology that you know and your destiny matrix. If you've got it a full thing like what I had this weekend, well, most of it was accurate, was it not? So this is why you have to look at it in that basis. So, Lewis's chart for Barcelona looks very emotional. Mercury's going to be exactly conjunct his natal moon. This feels very glorious, but also deeply emotional. Now, I pointed out last time with Charles, you don't see anger in a chart without having a reason to be angry. Now, why would we see emotion in a chart? Well, you can see emotion for a few things. You feel emotional because maybe you lose out on a win. Maybe you do win and it becomes like a homecoming. It's my first win in Ferrari. Feel very emotional. In the 9th house for him too. Can also be emotional because there's anger there too. I think it's more of feels sentimental to me. If I look at his chart, I always see tensions, or you never have a chart where there's not points of tension. And how many times in a race do you know that someone might win, but they're effing and jeffing on the radio because something's happening? So funny as well, in my video last week I said that Charles effing and jeffing to the engineers, and someone on live was like, God, he's really effing and jeffing on that radio. And I was like, call me Nostradamus. But I wonder if the emotion is actually in Cancer as well, sentimental for Lewis. Winning your first P1 with Ferrari after such a difficult year last year and with much dissent still going on, that's going to feel, I'd shed a tear, you know? So I think it's also this feeling that he's being caught up to. You know, he was saying to Kimmy, you're catching up to me, because Lewis is the only one to have 5 consecutive wins. And I think early on. And so now it's Kimmy. So it feels like they're being passed. But then also, Lewis having a podium at Monaco, I think they were saying that that rivals Ayrton Senna. And had this little grin on his face to say, like, I still got it. I'm teaching these laps. I'm still here, you know? So I think there's a lot of interesting energy coming up. I wanted to do this as a sort of Monaco update, also how I feel about Destiny Matrix update. I have some people asking me, saying, what are your predictions? And I like to think that I do my predictions without much gossip. I generally treat these drivers with respect. I don't like to gossip about their personal lives. I don't really care who they're dating. I don't fancy any of them. You know, I enjoy car racing. I have since I was a kid. I was saying this to my dad yesterday. He probably is so shocked to see me in my 30s now, like paying money to go to watch races. But I've always enjoyed car racing and bike racing. MotoGP was obsessed with MotoGP. You know, when I got my PhD, I said, call me Valentino Rossi because I'm the doctor. You know, I've always had these associations with car and bike racing. Maybe because I got a lot of Sagittarius in me, I don't know. But yeah, if you're interested in this, please let me know. What do you think about what's coming up? Lewis is now number 2 in the championship, which is I predicted accurately. I mean, I'm so happy about this because I really like Lewis. He's probably my second favourite. And I feel happy that he's regaining some of his glory days because the podium in Monaco, right? Kimi's 19 and Isaac Hadjar is 21. To combine, Lewis is like older than them. And he's like, I'm older than both of you combined, and he's still there on the podium at P2 at 41, showing you that age doesn't matter. You can still achieve things, right? So I think it's very inspirational. And you see a lot of these people, oh God, I hate these people. He's pushing 45. If you're closer to 40 than you are to 45, you're not pushing 45. He's 41. How is that pushing 45? Why have you added 4 years onto him? I get this all the time. You're pushing mid-30s. Babe, I'm 30. How am I pushing mid-30s? How can you be 30 years and 6 months and you're pushing 35? If I was just born, am I pushing 5 years old? Doesn't make any sense, does it? Stop trying to make us hard before our time. Anyway, this is a different rant. But if you're interested in these videos, let me know. I would love to do more of them. I'm finding them very interesting. I really like the specifics. I want to teach people that astrology is not just your sun sign. You can see technicalities. You can see broken tarmac. You can see cars not starting. You can see people regaining glory, getting angry, right? And this is what I do for the amazing people I do readings for. I'll be like, ooh, or I'll be like, wow. And the reason why, and again, I don't want to make this an egoic thing because that's not who I am, but it's sort of like I feel somewhat that I want to spread the message of astrology even more, just as so many of my wonderful colleagues do, is that when I have a reading with somebody and I want to help them, so I will give them as specific as possible predictions, that it's always so lovely when I get them coming back. And actually, I would say 75% of the readings I have are people that come back. They're return clients. They're people who are like, yes, you were correct. Or they were like, oh, I've realised I want to do this. So for me, I just want to help and also inspire. Maybe these videos inspire people to learn more about astrology themselves. And I'm very honest about whether my things are right or wrong. I'm really happy to say that I'm wrong about something. And that's hard as a Sagittarius to be like, I'm wrong. I don't like being wrong. But at the same time, I've been very honest and open about if my prediction's wrong, it's because I'm wrong, not because astrology or spirituality is wrong. It's because I, for whatever reason, didn't get that right. But for the most part, it's been fairly accurate. But I like to test it, and I think it's fun. We should have fun with these things, right? You know, I'm not on a TV channel having a gun to my head saying I've got to do these things. But I just think it's quite fun. Anyway, I'm going to stop ranting, and I'll check in for the next video. We'll see how Barcelona goes. We'll see what we can spot there. And then we'll also do a mid-season check-in for Destiny Matrix and see where we go from there. Thank you for watching. Bye.